Thank you for watching us on YouTube. But did you know that if you're on the go, you can get the full show as a podcast now? You can get our morning breakdown of the most important topics facing our country, news not being covered by the mainstream media, interviews with change-making progressives, and info on what you can actually do about all this. Search for The Damage Report on your favorite podcast app and subscribe so you know when new episodes are ready to go. So over the course of the past few months, we've been very lucky to have a bunch of candidates on the show. We've also had Nomiki Konst on the show, but for the first time ever, we have candidate Nomiki Konst on the show. Welcome to the show, Nomi.
Hey, John, thank you.
Glad to have you here. So you have announced that you are going to be running to be the next public advocate of New York City. Very exciting news. First of all, before we get into what the role is, your past experience, what you plan to do with it, when will that election actually be?
Ooh, that's the tough question. So I hate to start off so complicated, but what is likely to happen is the current public advocate of New York City, Letitia James, will win her general election for Attorney General, and that will create an opportunity for a special election, which will be called by the mayor of New York after she is sworn in. And excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold.
That's okay, I do too. I'm a mess, so you will sound healthy by comparison. Okay, so public advocate, it's a very interesting position with a pretty unique role inside of New York City. Can you tell us a little bit about what the public advocate is supposed to accomplish?
Sure. So the public advocate, there have been 4 public advocates in New York. The first public advocate was Mark Green. Mark Green was a famous consumer advocate that worked with Ralph Nader. He took the role in 1994. And so that was sort of where the idea came from. It was formed in a charter a few years earlier, really emerged out of a decade, 2 decades of continuous, extraordinary corruption scandals in New York City. Shocker. But this position really was intended to be a watchdog for New York City, a position where people who are not being served or represented in New York City would have a spokesperson, a person advocating for them. And of course, in New York City today, there are many that are not being advocated for because the income inequality is so extraordinary, so high here that I think that the job has evolved over the past few years.
So you mentioned Mark Green, Letitia James, the current public advocate. I believe de Blasio was public advocate. So obviously this is a position that's very important, high profile. You can go on great things, but obviously a role important in its own right as well. So you mentioned a few things that the public advocate is supposed to accomplish. You're a watchdog for corruption, advocate for working people. What do you think you've done that makes you qualified for that position, Nomi?
Well, when this idea first was presented to me, because I had some people reach out and say, you'd be a really good public advocate if this position opens up. And, I always listen to folks, and if you're in the public eye, people ask you to run for office often, especially if you're progressive, because we don't have that many. So I went and I researched the role of public advocate in history, and the more I read about it, the more I thought, I actually would like to do this. I probably would like to do it more than any other. I didn't plan on running for office. I definitely do not want to be mayor. But the public advocate is sort of this independent voice. I mean, not only do they have the ability to present a platform for the public, but they also oversee the media office of New York. I think most people didn't know that. They have the ability to sue government agencies when they're not performing with outside counsel. They obviously have a very large staff. The way that I'm going to look at it, I think for my personal experiences, I'm going to use the investigative abilities I've had as an investigative reporter. So when I'm looking into public corruption, conflicts of interest, problems in government agencies like the public housing here in New York, as it has quite a bit of a problem right now with lead, but it goes much further than that. Whether disaster relief is continuing, because don't forget, Hurricane Sandy, there are communities that still haven't recovered from Hurricane Sandy. Whether immigrant families are being torn apart, the public advocate can be a voice, can go in there and represent the people of New York. But they're not tethered to the system the way that, say, the council is, which has to deal with the 50 or so members, and of course the mayor, which has to deal with the entire city and several different types of unions and different agencies in the real estate industry. The public advocate can be an independent voice, and that's why I think the person who should run for public advocate and be public advocate is actually untethered to any machines or special interests.
Yeah, it is I'm not really familiar with any other places that have this exact sort of role that's obviously political and its purview, I guess, but somewhat independent in its actual functioning day to day. So obviously we're early on in this process. We don't even know exactly when the election will be. We don't know who else might be running. But I've read in the Intercept profile of you, there's the possibility of Jumaane Williams, who we've had on this program as well, that he theoretically could run. I think that's at this point more of a rumor than anything that he's said personally. But what do you think that this is likely to be a heavily contested position?
Right now there's so many names being floated, and this often happens when you have an open seat, especially in New York City. This is the first citywide special election, and there's a lot of things that make that unique. Not only is it going to be highly competitive, most likely, but it's a nonpartisan election. So you're not just dealing with Democrats, but there could be Republicans that jump in, independents, and they can all vote. So I do think that there'll probably be several candidates, not as many as the news is saying, 12, 15. I think it'll probably be maybe a handful of candidates that represent different communities, different parts of the city, and have different things to offer. And these are a lot of my friends. I think what I offer is pretty simple. I have been an investigative reporter. I have been somebody who's investigated corruption. I've been somebody who's gone to reform the Democratic Party in other areas, and I've been an activist. And I'm independent. So that's the most important thing. This is unfortunately turned into a position that many perceive as a stepping stone to the mayor. I can vow to you, and this is in all honesty, and I could I'll sign a document saying this, I do not want to be mayor. I will not run for mayor. And it is second in line to the mayor. If there is some sort of process in which if something happened to the mayor and the public advocate had assumed position, I would urge there to be a special election.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I'm not gonna personally hold you to that, and I will probably forget that you made that vow. So don't worry if someday you wanna run for mayor.
I'll say it over and over, don't worry.
Yeah. Well, Nomiki Konst, obviously, we've had you on before. You were talking about you being an investigative journalist. We've had you on to talk about your reporting. Very excited about your candidacy, and we'd love to have you on in the future as the actual race gets closer.
Thank you so much, John. Always appreciated that you have this space for me and for so many others.
Thank you. I'm always glad to have you on. Thank you very much for watching this clip from The Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.